Yeah, sorry, I just want to record this. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Oh, do you see it, right? You see the screen. Okay. So today it says here, motivation is what gets you started, but habit is what keeps you going. I actually spoken about this topic in shul a number of times. I gave a shir on this a few times as part of other things. The idea of habits and the importance of habits, and because all the research will show you that the way to be successful in your life is to turn tasks that you want that you know you need to do, such as exercise, into a habit,
Exercise.
and it makes it harder and makes it easier to follow through on things that you don't really want to do. So it makes it easier to do those things. So how does this work? So let's look at a little bit at some learning. So the Gemara already talks about this. Ula says in the name of Rav Huna, it says like Rav Huna, Damar Rav Huna, Kevan she'avar Adam Avera, Shana Ba, Husra Lo, Husra Lo. So the Gemara tells us that if a person does a sin and then repeats his sin, so it becomes permitted to him. So the Gemara asks, Husra Lo, it really is, it's permitted to him? How can we say that? So he says, oh, he'll treat it as if it was heter, as if it was okay to do. Here's a quote from Bruce Springsteen: "You get used to anything, sooner or later, it just becomes your life." In other words, the first time somebody does something wrong, let's say it's the first time somebody kills somebody, so they get nauseous, they have guilt, and so on. The second time it becomes easier. Third time it becomes easier. Even the worst crimes like murder, people who murdered a lot of people, they don't even start to think about it after a while because it just becomes kaheter, theft, or anything. People start to make excuses for it. So we see this in other aspects. So we see Ben Azai says, "Havi rats lamitzvah kala kechumura." That one should run for a small one, do a small mitzvah, a small mitzvah, like a strong mitzvah. Uvorach min avera, and you should run away from avera. So you should run to do a small mitzvah. Even the smallest mitzvah, you should run to do it. Why? Shemitzvah goreres mitzvah, avera goreres avera. Because a mitzvah, one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, and an avera leads to another avera. So schar mitzvah mitzvah, uschar avera avera. That the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and a reward for avera is an avera. So what does that mean? Schar mitzvah mitzvah. So he says here in the Bartanura, he says, Shamina Shamayim Misapim Mizamim Biyad, Mincha Asa Mitzvah Achas, Yasa Cheres, that once you do it, that it's from Shamayim, they give you the ability to, to do it again. You do one, you'll do another one. Kadela says lo schar al shneim. So you'll get schar on both of them, you'll get reward for both of them. He says here, Shishkar mitzvah mitzvah, Shishkol Adam, Mishtacher umisanig Abasiyas mitzvah, that you get a lot of pleasure if you do a mitzvah. Nechshav lo mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. Noter schal mitzvah shasal oneg gahana shenena basiyas. Somebody gets a mitzvah and a lot of pleasure for it. I meant to actually do the first one. Kadei minhag shel olam. This is the way of the world. Ta'osa mitzvah achas. That once you do one, noach lo lasos acheres, and it becomes easier to do the next one. Avera kasha lifrosh mehem, and if you do an avera, it becomes harder to get away from it. Once you get it, it becomes harder to get away from doing it. And so I think that there's two actually you have different ways of understanding this idea of schar mitzvah mitzvah. I think that, so here I'm using it in the terms of like the Bar Nur, that it's habit forming, that once you do it, you get used to doing it, and then it's habit forming, so you're going to do another mitzvah and you get pleasure from doing those mitzvahs. the more you're able to do it. The first one might be hard to do, but then as you do it, you see the benefit. It may be hard to give tzedakah because I'm like, I have to give my money. I really need the money and so on. But then once you see the benefit of it and you do it a couple of times, and you start getting this really good feeling about doing it. And then you end up doing it more and more because you see the benefits of doing that. I think there's another parish on Schar Mitzvah that when you actually do something good, so it's not just that you get schar, you get some sort of reward for it, but in it itself, and I guess that's the same idea, it itself becomes the reward. All of a sudden now it itself is a reward for doing it. Now it's interesting, there's a halacha that says, based on this, very interesting halacha, that says that because we're worried about habit forming stuff, so it says that when we daven, and during certain times we have mashich v'aruach u'morid hageshem, or we don't say anything. We don't say anything. Some people say morid hatal, and you have the same thing with v'sein tal matal livracha, right? V'sein bracha or v'sein tal matal livracha. These are the different things we say in davening. So the question is what happens if you're not sure? You went in autopilot, you're davening, and you're not sure whether or not you said these Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGeshem. So the Shulchan Aruch writes, well, it depends. In biyom rishon shel Pesach, Omer birchas ata gibor ad morid hatal, tzadik pamim, keneged lamed yom. He says, if you say the bracha ata gibor until morid hatal 90 times for the 30 days that you say that we're supposed to do it, meaning that what happens, that for 30 days, if you would say 30 days worth of a tefillah, so then we assume that it was a habit-forming thing. You did it for 30 days. And once it became like a habit, so then it's second nature. So you're going to always say, Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGeshem. So he says that if you sit down, and this is a crazy idea, and you say at 90 straight times, you'll form the habit. Now, you can't just say, Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGeshem, because that's not going to do it. You have to kind of like lead into it, right? Atagi Bar Lam Hashem. You have to do the whole thing, right? Or else you're not going to get that stuff. You're not going to get it because you're just going to say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGeshem. But then when you say it in context, it's going to become lost. So you have to say it in context. But if you say it like basically in context, for 90 times in a row. So then if you forget and you're not sure, so you could rely on the fact that you said the right thing. Based on this, it's very, very funny. I'm going to show you a video here. Look at this. Based on this is a custom that they had in the streets of Yerushalayim. They turned it into a song. And they do this. They sing this song over and over and over. So they do this song over and over and over in order to form the habit. They sing that song and over and over as a shul. The whole shul sings it over and over until they. So this way they could say, just in case they don't. So they dance around. It's a nice thing to do within shul, where they dance around and sing this song so they could get used to it. So we see the importance of having developing habits. So how do you do it? How do we do that? How do we develop a habit that sticks with us? So we saw a different thing, an idea of repeating something over and over and over until it becomes you do it. But how do you do that? How do you make it stick? How do you make it? Because a lot of times people do something and then it's very hard, like exercise or losing weight, right? So people have been losing weight for every single day. They keep going on this diet, and then this diet stops, and then they start the next diet, and then they start the next diet. And it's a constant fight. Or with exercise, they join this gym, they get all riled up for January. Right now, that was their New Year's resolution. The gyms get all packed. not this year, but in general years, they get all packed. People go for, you know, a few weeks, and they do it maybe even a few months, you know, they maybe even do a few months. And then all of a sudden, like, something happens, and they're tired, they get home late, they're tired, so they say, you know, I've been so good, I've been good, right? So they did it sometimes, and I'll take today off, right? And then the next day, it's another excuse comes up. They get a call, and they're like, "Ugh, it's getting late, I'm just gonna go shower." And then the next thing they know, they're not going to the gym anymore, right? So how do you do it? What's the trick to making a good practice into a habit? That's the question. But you have any suggestions that they've done personally, that they've done to make a habit stick?
Walking.
So so what's the trick to keep
I,
walking?
I think it's where you started, the idea of motivation. I think if you are really motivated to do something, then it doesn't become a habit that you're doing by rote or you fall in and out of. If you maintain your motivation, you don't stop doing the habit.
Also,
I agree. I think it's a self-motivation and a self-discipline.
I think it's more than that. I think you need to tell somebody and get affirmation when you're doing it, because somebody else knows, they can also help motivate you. It's not only yourself, but you also sometimes need somebody to give you a little push.
Yeah, Annie, sorry.
I think if you live with somebody who nags you enough about it, it could become a habit.
Also, I think if you make it pleasurable, and yeah, so
Make it
like,
pleasurable.
right.
Yeah. So I would say, so what I think we're gonna argue here, I'm gonna argue here, and I'm gonna show you some of the research and some of the things on this, some of the ideas based on a few books. We're gonna look into some of the books, but the over idea is actually not that motivation is starts. The motivation is the start of it. You need a motivation to start. But in order for something to take off, it has to become a habit, meaning, and this is how we're going to define habit. Habit meaning that you go on autopilot. In other words, if you get in a car, right, and you start to drive the first time. So I'm driving with my kids, and I'll tell you, I just drove with one of my sons drove home from school today. I went to school, and he drove home. It was I was anxious. I was anxious. He did a good job, but I was anxious the whole trip. I was holding on to that thing the whole trip, right? And he's looking around a lot, you know, and he's, it's everything. I was tired. Let's just, I was tired after he drove something that was the thing, because, he started to get a little fast. I'm like, you know what? He's like, I'm doing the speed limit. I know. I'm like, I know, but for me, just a little slower than the speed limit, please. Right? Because why? Because it's a job. It's a job. We're thinking about every little thing. Is he in the lane? Is he in the right lane? Is he stopping to stop, way distance from the next car? Every little thing when he's turning into the other lane. Is he looking carefully? Is the car in back of him? Is he slowing down too fast because the car in back of him might hit him? There's so many things that we're thinking about. I was tired, I was anxious and kind of tired after driving with him for that thing, and he did a good job, but I was tired but then when I drive, I don't even remember, because I'm listening to, whatever I'm listening to, my whatever the podcast or the share, whatever I'm listening to in the car. So I don't even remember that I actually so I don't remember how I got to school, right? Because I was so busy engrossed in my thing. I don't even think about that. I'm not thinking about the cars and this and that, because it's become a habit. The driving for me, I'm on autopilot. So the trick that we're trying to do, in my opinion, and I think that's what all the research and you're going to see what the books all say, is the trick is to try to figure out ways to make the everyday, the things that are hard, for us, like exercise, weight loss, all these type of things, how do we make them into a habit where we just go on autopilot, right? Or even worse, if we don't do it, then it's something is wrong. So it feels like something's missing in our life. I'll give you a good example of that. Brushing teeth, right? Did you ever wake up and you had to run, right? And you didn't get a chance to brush your teeth. So now you feel like, oh my gosh, how can I like go through this day? You're like, wait, I don't know. You have to, people like run in and get like Listerine or something to be able to, usually on flights, people have to bring toothbrushes onto the flight, but you go to Israel and then you'll see after the flight, everybody goes straight to the bathroom and they carry their little toiletry bag and they go straight to the bathroom after the flight when they come in the morning because they have to brush their teeth, right? Why do you have to brush your teeth? You can't wait till you get to your destination because you feel like if you don't brush your teeth, right? If you don't brush your teeth, how could you even start? Like it's something's missing. It's my morning routine. I have to brush my teeth, right? I have to brush my teeth. Even if you had like one of those like things that clean your breath, right? Let's say it wasn't an issue of bad breath, but you'd still want to brush your teeth because how could I can't start my day. I feel the same way personally of davening. Like I can't do much. Like for Shabbos day, I sit and I learn early in the morning, right? I learn, but like I couldn't possibly go to a job or something like that without davening. I would feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Like it's just so ingrained in my day that it's become a habit, and therefore I can't even do anything. So is that clear? I mean, do you feel like I feel like that's the trick. Like, how do we get the hard things that we want to do in life, the things that we want to fulfill, and make it into those type of feeling? Anybody have any thing before I go on to the next thing?
Well, it's that way with putting on tefillin in the morning, right? I just can't, I feel like I miss it. The day doesn't work for me if I'm not putting it on.
Right. Right. 100%. You need it to, you want it to work. I have to make it, I have to make it a part of just that. I want to make it so I don't have to think about it anymore. Right. It just happens and I don't feel the day. So how does that happen? Here's a very interesting study. And you could click on it when I send it out. People will do things like eat just out of habit. They're not hungry. They'll just eat because out of habit. Now, this study was really interesting because what they did is they took really stale, disgusting popcorn, right? And they put it in a movie theater, right? So the popcorn was disgusting. And they gave it to people for free. So when you came in to watch the movie, you get the popcorn, right? And people are sitting and eating this popcorn saying that it's disgusting, but yet they'll continue eating the popcorn throughout the movie because how could you sit in a movie without eating popcorn? Yeah, you have to have it. I'm sitting in a movie, I have to eat popcorn. So see, for us, I don't know. So for me, popcorn is not I don't have kosher popcorn, so I don't eat popcorn when I eat. But for them, they could not fathom not eating popcorn while watching movies. So even if the popcorn was just downright disgusting, they would still do it just to fulfill the habit. It's a very interesting idea.
What's a movie?
What?
What's a movie?
What's the movie? So watch a movie. So Charles Duhigg, and I'm going to show you a summary of his book. I happen to like his book a lot. I read this book a number of times. There's other books also that's as well, but I actually think he's a very good writer. He has a podcast as well. His podcast is on all different types of stuff. It's not just a habit. But Charles Duhigg wrote the book called The Power of Habit. I have it actually right by my desk right here. Holding it right here. I have my Power of Habit book. I've read it a number of times, this book. And it's why we do what we do in business and in life. So he spoke in a TED Talk, and I want to just skip to one part of his, we're not going to watch the whole thing. I just want to skip to one part of this. a famous study. I knew about the study beforehand, a very famous study, but let's listen to what he has to say here.
Write a bad word on a cup. Now, luckily for them, there had been a whole bunch of research that had been done into willpower. Most of you are probably familiar with this because you come from a teaching background. The most famous, of course, being the
Wait, I'll just tell you what he was talking about beforehand. Starbucks had a problem. Starbucks had the problem was that their employees had these 8-hour shifts and they were insulting. By the end of the 8-hour shift, they were insulting customers because they were tired. They had very low patience for people. So Starbucks spent millions of dollars to study how they could get their employees through the 8-hour shift without losing it, without falling apart. And so they wanted to figure out how they can make it that incentivize them and make them, not think about these things.
marshmallow test. I assume you guys have heard of the marshmallow test. For anyone who hasn't, this is how it worked. There was this researcher in the 1960s at Stanford. He had a 4-year-old daughter. He took her and a whole bunch of her friends and he put them in a room one by one. He put a marshmallow in front of them and he would say, okay, look, here's the deal. You can eat that marshmallow. I'm going to leave the room for 10 minutes. If when I come back, the marshmallow is still there, then you will get a second marshmallow. Now, I actually have myself a 4-year-old at home. And so I can tell you that putting a marshmallow in front of a 4-year-old is like putting crack cocaine in front of an addict. Like there's nothing more tempting. This experiment has been replicated. Let me show you some tape of what happens when you put a marshmallow in front of a 4-year-old.
I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back. It's yummy. Oh, it smells really good.
Only one of these kids was able to make it the entire 10 minutes. Let me show you which one.
How'd you do? Did you do good? You did? You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give me another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
So this guy, Miskal, he does his experiment, right? He finds that about 10 to 15% of the 4-year-olds, they could resist the marshmallow. He writes his results, this is the late 1960s, publishes it. Nobody cares. Nobody pays any attention. And a couple of years later, his daughter's in 5th grade. And remember, she's one of the test subjects. He's talking to her and he's like struggling to get her to tell him about her day. And he's asking about her friends. And she says, well, Susie keeps on getting into trouble, but Jimmy's doing well in class. And he realizes as he's listening that the kids she says are doing well are the same kids who had managed to resist the marshmallow. So he goes and he finds them in middle school. He finds them in high school and he finds them in college and post-college. One of the largest longitudinal studies that's been done, as many of you know. And he finds that the kids who managed to resist the marshmallow were more successful than their peers by like a statistically significant amount. He finds that they were getting their homework done more frequently on time. They're showing up for class more time. They were more popular in high school, not necessarily because they were like prettier or richer, but because they were just better at being friends. They got into better colleges, they got better jobs, higher paying jobs. They got married earlier and stayed married longer. There's, as many of you know, there's literally been hundreds of studies on willpower since then, most notably by Angela Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania. And all of them have found that willpower seems to be the single greatest correlate with future success, right? More so than high IQ, more so than having rich parents with a lot of resources. Willpower seems to be this thing that prepares people for life. And for Starbucks, this is fantastic because this is exactly what they want. They want to teach their employees willpower. But the question is, how do you teach people willpower? And the answer is through habits, by choosing a reaction ahead of time, and by making people conscious of what they're going to do when they feel hot-blooded in a cold-blooded state. Within economics, this is known as the hot-cold empathy gap. That basically, in the morning when you wake up and you've had a big breakfast, you are certain that you are going to eat healthy and have a salad that day. And as soon as you walk into the cafeteria and you're hot-blooded, you decide the hamburger looks a lot better. So how do you preserve that decision-making from the morning into the moment of temptation? How do you create more willpower? What's really interesting is if you look at the tape, I've turned off the sound on this one. The kids who fail at this are kids who constantly remind themselves about the marshmallow. Like watch this kid, even when he tries to ignore it, he hits the plate and he reminds himself. These kids, like, They all do these things where they can't help not paying attention to the marshmallow. Now contrast that with the kid that I showed you, who actually resisted for 10 minutes. When researchers asked him what he did, he said that halfway through, he decided that he was not going to look at the marshmallow, that he was not going to pay any attention to it, that if he had to think about the marshmallow, he was going to imagine a frame around it so that it reminded him of a photo. This is how we teach willpower. We teach people to make a decision ahead of time that they apply when they see a cue. And then we give them a reward. That kid who resisted the marshmallow, he said that he had decided ahead of time, if he could make it the whole 10 minutes, he was going to shove both marshmallows into his mouth at the same time. And that's exactly what he did. So how do you change a habit? How do I change my cookie habit? The answer is by premeditating the cues and rewards, by deciding ahead of time what you're going to see when you see that trigger, and then what your reward is going to be. And it has to be specific. Saying, I'm going to lose weight doesn't work. Saying, I'm not going to eat a cookie today does not bring you success. What you instead do is you say, at 3:15 in the afternoon, instead of going up to the cafeteria, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk over to someone's desk. Because I think part of the reason why I'm going up to the cafeteria is that it's fun to gossip with my friends, and all my friends are in the cafeteria. So instead of going up there, I'm going to look for someone else to go gossip with. And at 3:15, you stand up, that's your cue. You walk over to someone else's desk, in this case, a guy named Michael Barbaro, and you gossip about whoever happens to be out of earshot for the next 20 minutes. And you decide, I'm going to gossip hard. That's your reward. And then you go back to your desk. And I don't really like to brag about these things, but since then I've lost about 21 pounds and it's worked out pretty well for me. Thanks. The point being, this is what we know about habits. They have cues and rewards. And if you decide ahead of time, if you engage in this mindfulness in your life, where you're aware of what's driving these nearly subconscious behaviors, where your brain actually turns off, if you indulge yourself to pay attention to the things that otherwise kind of happen at the peripheries of our consciousness, we know from study after study, you have the ability to change any habit in your life.
So what he's saying is, and I'm going to show you a little bit more in depth, is that there's a relationship between willpower and habit, right? So in order to be able to change something, as Annie was saying, you need a reward. You need a tangible reward for it, and you need a cue that gets it started, right? And if you get the cue and you have the reward, then everything else will kind of fall in place. So how exactly does that how does that come about? What does that mean in practicality? So, and one other thing he said, I know he slipped in there, but I think it's really important, and I see it in myself. When I exercise, right, I also find myself eating a salad for lunch. In other words, when I exercise, all of a sudden I start noticing that everything that I do becomes healthier. I don't know if you have the same thing, but once you start thinking about health, then you start worrying about how much did you drink today? Are you eating right? You also realize that it just took me, if you're on the treadmill, which I go on the treadmill, so I realized that to get 100, to knock off 100 calories, it took me like 20 minutes on this treadmill. So now when I look at the candy bar and the candy bar says 200 calories, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just spent 20 minutes to try to get rid of 100 calories. Do I really want to eat that? I actually knocked out all sugary drinks because of that thought. Because of the treadmill, I decided I'm not drinking sugary drinks because they're just so high in calories, and I know how much I have to do. So I'd rather kind of eat my calories than drink the calories, right? So the question is, that's one idea that he has. But what he's saying that's so urgent, what's so important, is that you need to find yourself a cue that allows you to get this whole thing started. So give me an example. So somebody give me an example of a cue and a reward, and how this would work in practicality. Somebody have something that they do that you have a cue and a reward. Nobody.
Q is a day that it is acceptable to walk outside, and the reward is knowing that when you're coming back down the hill, you've completed it.
Yeah, that's good. So, so the only issue with such an example, right? The only issue with such an example is, so the Q is a nice day, right? A nice day says, okay, I have a nice day. I should go outside and go for a walk, right? So you have a Q, and then the Q leads to that. So then you're kind of reliant on the nice day to have that Q. I'll give you some example. So here's the example. So when I wake up in the morning, right? A lot of people have their phones right next to them when they sleep, right? As you have his phone. So the question is the wake up is a cue. So now what do you do? So if you say, okay, the first thing I'm going to do in the morning, my son has been great. Also, the first thing when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to just do the daf yomi, right? I'm going to do the daf yomi. That's I'm going to wake up, wash my hands, quickly say about it, and then I'm going to do the daf yomi. The cue is the wake up, right? I woke up. Now I'm going to do, so the cue is I woke up, I have to brush my teeth. That's a cue. And then the reward of brushing your teeth is the nice feeling in your mouth, right? The nice feeling that I have a fresh feeling in my mouth. That's the reward. For me, so for learning, the reward is the siyum, right? Or, you finish something, right? You got to siyum. That's why they make a big deal out of these siyums, that you have some sort of party so you could continue. You could say, I'm going to do this so I can have the reward. Now, maybe for some people, that siyum will be the siyum hashas in 7 years, just to tell everybody, I did it. 7 years, 7.5 years, 7.5 years. I did it every morning. I woke up, I had my cue, and then I got it out.
You go without doing it.
What? What?
Oh, well, you can do daf yom. You can go to the siyum hashas without.
Yes, but
without doing it.
Yeah, but you know when you did it and when you didn't do it.
Right. But I think that you need something else to really make you do it day after day than just something that's remote. I think you need something that's more an immediate reward than something that's 7.5 years off.
Some people, I think it's different strokes for different folks. Let me explain what that I mean by different strokes for different folks. Some people in life need a lot of stroking, right? They may need a lot of rewards. So for instance, I always say like movie stars, right? They always need people to keep hitting their like button on their social media, right? If they don't get their million likes, then they feel like they're a failure. They constantly need stroking. A Nobel Prize winner might work their entire life and their reward is they're looking for that single stroke where somebody says, you did it, you got the Nobel Prize, right? So that they'll be willing to work for 30, 40, 50 years in order for that hope of having that single reward. But that will get them going to do it. So different people may have different things of how they define the reward, but you need to kind of have that reward to keep you active.
So why does the reward have to be recognition as opposed to intrinsic?
No, it could be anything. The reward could be absolutely anything. That's why a different stroke, it could be different things, but any it's whatever you consider a reward. For some people, it might be ice cream, right? For some other people, like in other words, I'm going to have salad every day for lunch, but on Sunday lunch, I'm going to have ice cream after my salad, right? So therefore, I could eat salad every single day because I know, but then you have to also have the ice cream. Eventually, you don't need the ice cream. Eventually, you don't need the ice cream. But at the beginning, you have to make sure that you get that reward, or else it won't help you with all the other things. I'll tell you, this is completely separate, but it's not what I was going to talk about. But there was a thing with Febreze, right? Febreze, I think I read this in I think it was a Malcolm Gladwell book, or it could have been I don't know, it's one of those type of books about the history of Febreze, the spray that gets rid of smell. So Febreze is different than all other types of aerosols, according to this thing. That Febreze actually kills the smell. Everything else covers the smell. But Febreze actually, they found when they invented it, it actually killed the smell. And so but they couldn't sell this. They had this great product, and they were telling everybody about it. And they even had people like who were in jobs that they just was reeked of terrible smell, and they would give them for free. They give them the Febreze to make sure, and it would get rid of the smell. And the people were like crying. They had this like woman. She was a park ranger, and she's just reeked, and she could never get a date. She had no friends because she smelled, and they gave her this Febreze, and then all of a sudden she was like, her life came back. And so they had this like amazing product, and they couldn't figure out why nobody wanted to buy it, right? Until they thought about what's the reward for actual cleaning up? What is the reward? What do you get for actually cleaning up? And the reward is, they said, so in the end of this whole long thing and his thing, he said the reward that like when they gave it to all these, the reward was the nice smell that smells like clean. It has to smell clean, even though it is clean, even if it's 100% clean. If it doesn't smell clean, then it's not considered clean. But for people who are very into, it's not considered clean. So they had to make it that it smells clean. That it wasn't just good enough to remove the smell. You had to actually have that end thing where you go, yes, now it's clean, right? So you need to have the reward in order to be able to get everybody to do the job.
I find, can you hear me?
Yes.
I find that after sitting all morning in front of the Zoom, if I don't go out and walk and come back feeling alive again, my whole day is ruined. I need to move myself in order to feel alive.
Yeah, that's good. So if you have your cue, if your cue is, that I finished my Zoom session, right? Then the cue that triggers me to get up and walk. And then the reward is at the end, I feel alive. I feel good about my working. I feel I'm healthier and I'm doing better. So what the trick is to any change is to find areas where you could get cues to remind you of it, that it's time to do something. Like I have all these apps, these habit apps and so on. I have so many of them, and they don't work in the sense that even if you check it off, if you don't have the reward, if you don't have the cue to make it, even if it gives me a reminder, that could be a cue. But if I don't have if it doesn't happen at a certain time where I can focus on, where I can make it so it's automated, then it's just not gonna work. Okay, so here's a little video. It's a video, but I'm not going to go through the whole video, but I'm going to keep it in this thing so you could watch it, where he summarizes the book. He does actually a very good job, this guy.
We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Aristotle. If you want to change your life, you need to first change your habits, because we as humans are creatures of habit. When you wake up in the morning, you probably follow a certain routine, whether checking your email, checking your cell phone, drinking a glass of water, or getting some coffee. Throughout the day, you can count on other habits to occur as well, even if you're not fully aware of them. We think that we're making well-informed decisions, but we're not. Most of the things that occur throughout the day happen automatically without much thought at all. Habits run your life. And if you have bad habits, your life is going to suck. So if you want to change your life, you need to first change your habits. Fortunately, once you understand how habits work, you can change them with greater success. That's what this video is about: what habits are, why and how they form, and how to change them. So what are habits and why do we have habitual tendencies? Basically, our brains require a ton of energy, about 20.
So I'm not going to go through this whole video, but I do suggest you say it's only 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes, but it is getting late. But it's important. He's going to break down really how to look at how to understand the you know, the physiology of it, and understands why we do the things. It's kind of a little small summary of this Charles Duhigg's book. There's other books like this, Atomic Habits. There's so many books on habit. In fact, here
We are what we repeatedly.
Fogg, another person who writes on habits, made this chart. He has a whole thing on a whole website where you work on, they call it tiny, they have tiny habits. And he has this whole behavior grid, which says how each different thing in our life could focus on, you know, what we need to do in order to develop into a habit. For certain things, you have to do it many, many times to develop it into a habit. Other things, you could do it, you know, once and it can become a habit. You know, they had this, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called David and Goliath. Was it David and Goliath? I think it was, where he gives a theory that somebody has to do something 10,000 hours, right? You have to practice 10,000 hours. And this became very popular. It wasn't just him. He didn't make up the idea. The idea was out there, but he made a whole book on it, that you have to do something 10,000 hours to become, you know, proficient in it. The truth is that that's wrong. The truth is that research actually says that if you want to master it, if you want to be like the top, right, then you're 10,000 hours. But to just get something going, you just need a small amount of time to actually get some proficiency. And I think we did that in one of the classes with, I believe we did, I'm not sure. I think we did with how to play ukulele, right? You could do it very, very quickly. You get the thing just to get started, you could get it pretty quickly. So the idea of mastery will take lots and lots of repetition of the habit in order to make it till you're completely fluent in it. But for many things in our life, we could still change by making small little changes, tiny changes in our life, where we can make like one thing, like I said, if I get used to cutting out sugary drinks and have water, so the water triggers me to think about every time I want to drink, I get water instead of a sweet drink like soda. So the next thing you'll see is that I'll start thinking about my salads, right? That I should have more fruits and vegetables, 5 a day, rather than the junky cereals. And one little tiny change could therefore lead to many other bigger things. Whoops. Oh, no. 1 second. This is a beautiful idea. So it says that one second. What was right, that although we have habits, although we get habits, there are certain things we want to appreciate in our lives and we don't necessarily want as habits. And sometimes once we get habits, so like you have with the tefillin, right? This is why I want to put this at the end, is as important as habit is, where I get into habit, I wake up in the morning, I put on my tefillin, I daven, right? The bad side of the habit is that you become a little bit too comfortable. You become too comfortable with the habit. So therefore, what they did is, if you read this, they made it that when you actually had to go to the Beis Hamikdash, you went different ways. Why? So you shouldn't feel like it's rote. It should become something special to you. And so sometimes when you're in a bad habit or you're just in rote, you have to do something to pull yourself out in order to make it so it's new, fresh, and then be able to fix the habit. So this is just the beginning of this kind of discussion of it, and we'll do it in other future classes of other things, but there has to be spontaneity and ability to break old habits, bad habits, and form new good habits to be able to accomplish the things that we want to do. So on that, I wanted to just end off with a nice song, and encourage you. I know he already started, Mari Grubenow. Rabbi Grubenow, so he already started this year about his father, saying Kaddish for his father. You can find it on YouTube, and I'll post this and send everything out as well. So if you never heard this song, it's Mordechai Shapiro. I'll say Schar Mitzvah.
Kitano bisimcho Yigagaluloi Lasois mitzvo Gedoyle meri shoino Oise mitzvo Achas kitano bisimcho Yigagalu mitzvo Gedoyle meri shoino Oise mitzvo Achas kitano bisimcho Yigagaluloi Lasois mitzvo Gedoyle meri shoino Oise mitzvo achas kitano bisimcho Yigagalu mitzvo gedoyle merishoyno Schar mitzvo ein davar mitzvo ben mitut mitzvo chaf noch mitzvo Peresher oel maze stam el amavo Schar mitzvo ein davar mitzvo ben mitut mitzvo chaf noch mitzvo stam el amavo
All right. Have a great night, and thank you all. I really appreciate you coming to the class.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night, everyone.
Great
It's good to
night.
have you
We're
back in
gonna
Minion
post
too.
Maury Robino now.
Yeah, I sent out the thing. I don't
Because
know.
I can't find it from a couple of weeks ago. I was looking all over for it.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
And then
She's in a very cool.
Ruth sent me something recently, but I couldn't open it. So,
Okay, I'll send it to you.
okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a
Take
good-
care.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good night.
You too.